Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to this session. I'm really excited. First of all, I'm excited to see all the folks that are on here. I really appreciate your time. I'm Cherie Dawson Edwards. I serve as the Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs. I'm an Associate Professor in Criminal Justice in the College of Arts and Sciences here at the University of Louisville, and I'm delighted to be working very closely with my friend and colleague, Dr. Henry Cunningham, in the Office of Community Engagement to bring a series of sessions that are focusing on community engaged scholarship. These sessions primarily are targeted for folks that are either going to serve on personnel committees or promotion and tenure committees, chairs, deans, anyone who's in the promotion and tenure process, so that we can build a culture on this campus of reviewing community engaged teaching and learning and scholarship in a way that it's valued and seen as important work to our university. So I think most people can agree that is important work, but sometimes it's a struggle for people in the process, even if it's merit evaluations or whatnot, to plug it into our existing policies and structures. And so Henry and I are about, well, at least I'm about dismantling structures and building them so that community engagement can be valued. But certainly we are here to do education about this, but also to work on policy change and things of that nature to make sure that it's institutionalized across campus. So what I can tell you from my positionality of what being in this seat for about 7 months, but having been at U of L for 11 years, is that there are pockets of this university that are doing this community engaged stuff well. And I'm not talking about the brilliant faculty that are doing it, but there are promotion and tenure committees, there are deans, there are chairs that are very supportive in valuing this type of work, but they're pockets and they're not necessarily systems or institutionalized. And so we are working hard to make sure that when the pockets of people may be gone, that there is policy in place that, and not just practice, to make sure that community engaged scholars are valued. So the run of the show is me. I'm just welcoming you. Henry will talk a little bit, and then our guest will share some knowledge and expertise about this. And then we'll come back. I think I'm the case study because I am a community engaged scholar, and then we'll do some Q&A, and that's the plan for the show today, right, Henry? All right, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Cherie, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Henry Cunningham, and I serve as Director of Community Engagement here at the university. And it is a pleasure to be here today to talk about this work on community engagement. With us today is Dr. Barbara Holland, and Dr. Holland is very humble, and she will not give herself justice, so I will tell you a little bit about her before we move on. She's an internationally recognized scholar and administrator with expertise in organizational change and community engagement. She's a pioneer in the field of community engagement and has published numerous journal articles, book chapters, and books in the field. She has served as director of the National Service Learning Clearinghouse and as an administrator in the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Dr. Holland also held executive positions at the University of Sydney, Western Sydney University, Portland State University, Northern Kentucky University, and at IUPUI. She's well known for her expertise in areas of organizational change in higher education, with a specific emphasis on the implementation and assessment of community-based learning, engaged scholarship, and community campus partnership. She has mentored many of us in the field of community engagement, including myself, and for that, I am extremely grateful. Barbara, welcome. It is glad to have you in our midst. The practice of community and university partners working together is not new. This is something we have been doing for many, many years, making discoveries, creating and solving societal problems. As a matter of fact, it's the foundation on which the land grant institutions were created. Later on, urban and metropolitan universities became involved in this work as they sought to address urban issues. Engaging with community partners to address societal issues is embedded in the teaching and research of many of our faculty as a methodology. And so community engagement is not new. We just call it something else, but we have been doing this stuff for quite some time now. Community engaged scholarship is lauded for its ability to produce immediately relevant benefits for communities and for fulfilling the civic purpose of higher education. The problem we have with community engaged scholarship is that adequate evaluation and reward for community engaged work lag behind its implementation. We are doing this work, but we don't have a system in place to properly evaluate this work and to properly reward our faculty, particularly for promotion and tenure purposes. This issue is not unique to U of L, so it's just not U of L that has this problem. It's an issue that many institutions across the country are grappling with. Some of them have have been very bold in addressing this issue and have done pretty well. Others not so well. So what we want to do today is have a conversation where we can learn about the importance of community engaged scholarship, hear how it has been navigated or can be navigated, and what are some things that we can do to assist and support faculty who are engaged in this work and who are seeking promotion and or tenure. But before we move further, I want to hear from our Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs, Cherie, who herself is an engaged scholar and has been very successful in navigating this work for her own promotion. So Cherie, if you don't mind, share with us how you went about, with in your case.
Sure. So I know lots of people have heard me talk about this before, so I'm not going to share a presentation. We did one in the spring where I went through specifics, but I am going to drop some links in the chat for you all, things that I use as I reference how to make the case for promotion and tenure as an engaged scholar. So I got this term from Henry, but I consider myself now a public impact researcher. And while we know what community engagement is, the public impact research means that your work has some type of public impact. Because when we think about community engaged scholarship, it could be that you did community engaged scholarship and you produced a publication that nobody has read, right? And that's great because that works wonderful for promotion and tenure. It doesn't matter if anybody's reading it as much as it matters that you did a peer-reviewed publication. When we think about public impact research, you might also have that publication, but you also have had public conversations. You maybe have done practitioner conferences as well as academic conferences. You maybe have enacted agency change. I'm a criminal justice professor, so my research area deals with racial and ethnic disparities in the juvenile justice system, and that runs over into the schools and looking at school discipline and exclusionary school discipline, such as suspensions and expulsions and things like that. So the racial disparities there. And so while certainly some of my service activities have led to some expertise, a lot of expertise. I mean, a lot of my expertise from teaching comes from the fact that I've served on advisory boards, or I've worked inside of a school, or I've worked with folks in a juvenile detention center, or I've worked with an agency for the court designated workers across the state. So I certainly can say that it has helped there. But when I think about how that service has relayed into research, it has come in different forms. So for instance, my very first grant was I guess my first six-figure grant was a grant related to what was then called disproportionate minority contact, which we now call racial and ethnic disparities in juvenile justice. I became an expert on that topic because I served on the Governor's Juvenile Justice Advisory Board and a subcommittee that was dedicated to looking at racial and ethnic disparities. And I got on that in like 2008. By 2012, there was an RFP out, a request for proposals, to do research at the top 4 counties with the highest racial disparities in juvenile justice. And so because of the expertise that I gained on the advisory board, I was able to apply for the grant, and I got the grant. Now, that grant produced a grant report, a sizable grant report, but it also produced scholarly literature. And then it eventually produced agency change. So in the grant report, I had a list of recommendations in one of the agencies, the Administrative Office of the Courts, which plays a big role in how juveniles or youth, I like to call them youth, are processed. They decided to do a wholesale rethinking about how they look at their work through what they now call a racial lens, and they'd never done that before. So they took my recommendation to heart into practice and created a model guide where they have set training schedules for all of their frontline workers, but they also use a lot of data in all of their meetings to look at the impact of their work on certain populations, particularly in this state, Black youth. And so that led to another mini grant for me to evaluate their new statewide agency model. And so when I made the case for my promotion and tenure, when I went up for promotion and tenure, then I had to not just talk about the artifacts that count in my department's, what is a research, product, but also to talk about the policy change and the agency change that that work contributed to. So there's a site that I'm going to post when Barbara's talking that talks about, what do you need to do to make your case for promotion and tenure if you view yourself as a community engaged scholar. And it says, and I'm not very good, well, you might not think this, but I'm not very good at self-promotion. I don't like to go around and say, hey, did you know I did this? Did you know? I don't like to do that. But it says shameless promotion. And I'm just going to read an excerpt. It says, depending on tenure review policies, requirements, and standards of your department and college, you may have many different ways to highlight the impact and quality of your community engaged scholarship work beyond publication. These pieces may fit into several places, such as a career statement, your vita, or letters of support, and should be showcased whenever possible. Some of these include, and they have a list, and I'll send this out, measurable outcomes of your research, policy impacts from your research, which is what I gave agency policy, but there was also a piece of legislation that was proposed based on my report. General descriptions of all impacts of research, evidence for your national, international reputation in the field due to your community engaged scholarship, any community engaged scholarship awards, incorporating community engaged scholarship into your career statement. And I'll say that was one of the challenges for me, is to how do I adequately incorporate it? Because a lot of times our community engaged work is deemed as service. And to me, it's like, I was describing to some people that it's like a rubber band ball, right? That my community engagement's in all parts of my CV. It's in all parts of my AWP. It's in all parts of who I am. And so how do I write a memo that just speaks to teaching, or just speaks to research, or just speaks to service? And I'll tell you that the way the last iteration of a memo for me, I did an unorthodox way of doing it. I would say like service to research, or, service to teaching, and I like did this connection. And of course I did the traditional, these are all the publications that I had, or here's my teaching evaluations. But my service section was very extensive, and it wasn't to minimize the research, because I actually do have the research too, but it's to say, my service is not just going to faculty meetings. It's not just being on a departmental committee. And those are all great service, and please do those because we need your service. But it's not the same as a colleague who does just those things. It's not the same that I went to the zoo at 8 a.m. every Friday morning for 6 weeks to work on the Jefferson County Public Schools, behavioral codes. That's not the same thing as I also showed up to the faculty meeting. And so I really want to work in this position and with Henry and the whole Office of Community Engagement to make sure that we are codifying things and that these ideas, like there's wonderful departmental practices, but those practices become models for other folks to be able to review public impact research, but also community engaged scholarship. And then one last thing I want to say, as I've been having these conversations with my colleagues across campus, luckily in this position, I get to meet a lot of different people who have a lot of different types of promotion and tenure policies. And it dawned on me, and I want to give a shout out to my HSC colleagues, and particularly I would say the School of Medicine for giving me thoughts about how community engagement kind of mimics the laboratory, right? And so we give credit for people who are working in a lab setting, right? Even though that hasn't produced the scholarship yet, you're doing the research, you're working with, let's just say lab rats. I mean, I'm a criminal justice professor, like I don't know. So say you're in a lab working with lab rats, whatever you do with that, you're getting credit for that. That's not service like going to a faculty meeting. That's service. I mean, that's research going into your eventual report or publication. And I would like to make the argument, and I don't know how this is going to look in policy, that our community is our laboratory for community engaged researchers. So the things that we do out in the community, the advisory boards we serve on, the public presentations that we do and share our expertise, that's how we know people. That's how we gain legitimacy. That's how we gain access to do our research. And so how is that the same thing as, attending a faculty meeting, or I joke and say, chairing the hallway plant committee? Like, that's not the same thing as that. And so we have to work to differentiate what is service and what kind of service you're doing. And is there a level between what we traditionally think of as service and that service to research, or that service that leads to excellence in teaching? And so that's kind of, where I am. I will drop these links in there. Of course, we have a wonderful engaged scholarship handbook that Henry and a lot of folks that are in this meeting worked on a few years ago. So we have some guidance. But the handbook is guidance. What we need is to adapt and change our policies to reflect the things that we value. And as a Carnegie engaged university, we value community engaged work. And so it's our jobs, all of our jobs, to ensure that the faculty that do this type of work, and staff there, we have wonderful staff that are community engaged as well, are valued at this university and can achieve the same goals of those who don't engage in community work. So with that said, is that good, Henry? Did I cover enough of what I needed to cover?
Yes, that was perfect. So, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good. And we want to get Barbara's thoughts. That was excellent, Cherie. I think you gave a good example as to how you were able to navigate this work and be very successful in doing it. So that's perfect. I want to shift now to Barbara, who want to share some of her thoughts as well, based on her many years of experience in this field, worked with different campuses and all that she has done. So Barbara, go ahead, please.
Okay, that was fabulous, and sets up many of the themes I would like to share with you. I do want to say first and foremost, I have been on your campus a number of times, probably I would say at least 4 visits, each visit being 4 to 5 days. So I'm guessing some of us on this call may have met and chatted before. So I'm pleased again to have a connection and a conversation with your university. It's been a while, and I stay in touch with Henry, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak with you today about the growing importance of engagement. And so I'm going to give you a little question to think about while I'm chatting along. I'd like you to think about, how do you think the public right now around your city sees the value of your university? If you read the various academic and public news, you know that the value of a bachelor's degree is being widely questioned, and the cost is going up, the confidence is going down. Is the degree really worth the money? Historically, the United States higher education was wildly admired. From the 1950s in particular, so maybe going back to post-World War II, all the way into the early 80s, Congress, the donors, the community, the country totally celebrated universities. Because they were creating new inventions, higher ed was deeply and very publicly engaged in the race to space, the creation of vaccines, the early efforts to create racial and economic equality, and other challenges that we were very visible and appreciated participants in contributing to better public well-being. And what happened? Where did that go? In 1981, a very terrible thing happened. Some of you may be old enough to remember it. The federal government and the Reagan administration decided to shift. I remember the presentation of it in Congress. They shifted grants to loans, and ever since then, public support and appreciation of the value of a degree has slipped. It's become more and more expensive. The states tried to fill the financial gap, but by the 90s and early 20s, other kinds of demands made it difficult to continue to be, for the states to serve the institutions, and they also started to withdraw funds from the universities. They actually have cut many of the funds for institutions. Today, most institutions rely more and more on donations and to support students and research. And many of our public universities are facing declining enrollment and rising tuition, and it's in a very interesting time how we're going to get through this to get back to a sense of the value of a degree and a value that is affordable. What has become of the focus of excuse me? What has become of the focus of donations? The real focus, much of the focus on donations has fallen to mostly, and the research shows, mostly sports and health and science. Sports and medicine, of course, are very fabulous and important subjects, but as an institutional, in our institutional support of staff and the entire institution, we aren't getting enough support to really inspire people to see that we have this important role to improve the state, the region, and the nation, frankly. It's really kind of, we've lost our appreciation that the faculty of the community respecting that the university really has a critical opportunity to really support and engage the community and to make sure that we work on challenges that are local as well as global. The value of a degree right now is also so much in question, and the responses that universities around the country are using are varied, but largely based on financial issues. The public disinterest is widespread, but I'm absolutely convinced it can be turned around pretty easily. Well, maybe not easily, but I think there are some, I'm going to share some ideas about how we get it back. Your university is really doing amazing work. I know it. I have been on your campus. And you are doing great work in teaching and research, but it needs to be more visible. It needs to be more broadly appreciated across the faculty. It is the engagement of teaching, learning, and research in the community gives the institution local touch. The more faculty are visible in neighborhoods and businesses and industry, the more the community will advance and the university will be seen as a neighbor with extremely high value. That said, it's not for everybody. Not all faculty are suited for this kind of activity, but it's time to really organize an agenda. And one of the things I wanted to add to that too is a lot of it, the critique of engagement is do it if you want, do it if you don't want. But it also has a sort of a factor of it that if you do it, it doesn't matter because I don't understand the value of it and the community isn't the people who should be judging your performance. And I think all that is really needs to change because higher ed broadly is losing its mojo, frankly. So I think an organized and intentional agenda of community engagement is really the best way to reshape public interest and public attitude about your institution. Community engagement is really a growing strategy that's becoming very central to reconnecting community to the university. There are many institutions now that are actually starting to regain a warmer relationship with their communities. Community engagement community engagement is already an active method of teaching, learning, and research across a lot of your faculty, mostly in younger faculty who actually had entered your university having experienced it in their own engagement, and perhaps from throughout their own education, from kindergarten to college degrees to PhD. Many of your younger faculty have had engagement throughout their own education, and they carry that passion into their own path to a doctorate and a professorship, and they are very experienced and have in the methods of engagement and attaching them clearly and deeply to teaching, research, and senior faculty tend to discount some of that, unfortunately, because there is some culture that seems very persistent that faculty who are more senior tend to want to pass on the experience that they had to a new generation. I don't know the data, but I'd be interested in it. Cherie, if we could figure it out. I'm guessing that you probably have at least 5 generations of faculty. We have, most institutions now have many different faculty who are of different generations and different backgrounds in terms of their path to being a professor and working permanently at a university. Higher ed needs to really start to think about how it examines its future, and I think those younger faculty, midlife faculty, are really a great resource to start to think about how do we work first and foremost in our local community to restore and encourage the community to understand the value of having a research university in your community and the impact it can have on the economy, on schools, on health, on equity, and other issues that are important in the community. I'll end with some examples of universities that I think most of you would find felicitous and appreciative of a strong university that have developed very interesting forms of engagement. What's happening in these institutions, when I read them off to you, these institutions are being affected and recognizing my thoughts on the younger generations, the multiple generations. And what's happening now is many of these institutions I'll mention are actually organizing faculty around questions and ideas and certain kinds of topics, and lesser in terms of discrete disciplines. So the universities are really moving the younger generations are really moving the culture in a way that I think is going to lead to, and is certainly is showing signs of leading to, greater public support and appreciation. Among the institutions I encourage you to think about, and in all of them, they are organizing multiple disciplinary teams. They are organizing around topics, and they are sharing across each other as well. University of Pittsburgh, University of Utah, Arizona State University, Ohio State, Johns Hopkins, California Polytech, Central Florida, Brown. There's a lot more, and it is largely younger and middle life faculty who are leading the charge, trying to create a idea that's going to help higher ed return to public appreciation, because they are more visible and more grounded in issues, and they make it clear and share it with the public. And this is how higher ed is going to get back to the time when we were highly admired. It's already starting, and I think it's going to accelerate very much. So I'll stop there. I struggle with sort of thinking about this. I stumble a lot because I'm very excited by this. There are incredibly innovative ideas coming out about how faculty are judged and how we do our work. And it is very clear to me that we will always have departments, but we will survive and we will thrive by actually turning to doing much more multi department teams. So I'll stop there.
Barbara, thank you for sharing those thoughts. Very, very interesting indeed. As you were talking, I think what I got out of what you presented is the fact that as institutions of higher learning, we need to think about the value of what we do, the value of our work. How relevant are we, and what impact are we having on the community, which I think is so important. Because of the higher cost of studying in higher education, I think we need to look at what impact do we bring? Are we still relevant? And so what contribution are we making to the community? And I think community engagement and engaged scholarship is our contribution, is what we can do. And so I think we need to think about what can we do to support faculty who are engaged in this work, because their work is actually helping the institution to be more relevant in today's world. So thank you for sharing that. Very insightful. I want to hear from other people in the audience as well. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear, what you think about what is being presented today, what is being discussed, and everything that you have to share. And already I see your hand is up, and Dana, see your hand is up. So please go ahead, Dana. Then Cherie Wallace follows next.
Hello, and thank you so much for coming. And I so appreciate, what you had to share, and also what Cherie shared about her experiences in community engaged scholarship. I've attended sessions in the community engagement shop, and I, had shared from my own experience just because of my understanding in the courses that I teach, where I look at, similar to Cherie, marginalized populations and, just the impact that it's had upon them as it relates to communication. And so one of the things that I've just always tried to do in my courses is to give students the opportunity to have those types of lived experiences that they may not otherwise have. And so I'm curious, I'm a term faculty person, and I'm curious, have you, Barbara, had any kind of, can you offer any kind of suggestions as it relates to mentoring, as it relates to community engagement? So, for example, when a term person, we just recently started promoting term faculty, and I'm curious what that will look like for a term person versus a tenured person, or even a PTL, in terms of them being able to be promoted. And so that's one question that I have. And so what would mentoring look like, or could it potentially look like with a faculty person who is tenured, or a program, but some way to shore up the opportunities for a term faculty person who has the values of community engagement, to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. So that's one question that I have.
I have to admit, I'm not familiar with the term.
It just means they're full-time faculty, but they're not on tenure track. So here we have non-tenured faculty, full-time faculty, we call them term, and they can be on 1, 2, or 3-year contracts, but often those contracts are renewed year. Like we have term faculty that have been here for decades, so they're definitely full-time employees that are probably not going anywhere. And so while our governance document allows for term faculty to be promoted, so they can be promoted from instructor to assistant professor to associate professor to full professor, they're not getting the tenure associated with that, but they are getting, they should be getting a pay bump, and they have to articulate their case. So for instance, when I review promotion and tenure, I also review promotions for term faculty, and so they have the same case that comes through my office, that they have to make the case that they should be promoted. Each unit, though, similar to tenure, has a different way of evaluating term faculty. And so just to chime in really quickly, and I'm not taking over for Barbara, but just to explain a little bit with Dana, then, most of our term faculty are teaching faculty, right? And so when I look at unit level promotion and tenure guidelines and promotion for term, then it's focused on the area that your term about. Some term are faculty administrators, right? But majority of term have higher teaching loads. And so excellence in teaching is important for term. So I think for term faculty, so I think when we think about where community engagement comes in, it has to do with making the case for your teaching excellence and how excellent your teaching is. It's not just that you have good evaluations, but you've gone that because you do it this way, and the impact that it has on your students and the impact that it has on community, that you're making the case of excellence in teaching. And so, of course, moving up the different ranks requires different things. And so if you're moving up from assistant to associate, you need to be proficient in all the areas that your AWP reflects. And then, there are differences from moving from associate to full professor term. And so I thank you, Dana, for bringing this up, because I think there's a lot of folks that don't realize that term faculty members can be here for a long term. They think it's short term, and it doesn't mean that. I know, I mean, you've been here longer than me, I think, or at least as long as me, and I'm becoming kind of a midtermer around here. So thank you for bringing that up, because a lot of people, Barbara, even on our campus, don't recognize that our term faculty are not just 1 year contract workers, that they're just not on the tenure track.
Thank you. I can see the problem. I wasn't aware of that process, but the only thing I would add to it is I wonder if it would also be possible to include in their reviews some information of the impact in the community as well.
Okay, I think there's a question from Cherie Wallace. Go ahead, please, Cherie.
Hi, thank you so much. And I do remember you, Dr. Holland, when you were here years ago. I still use the deal model in my service line course. And I thank you also, Cherie, and Henry, for bringing her here today to talk about promotion and tenure. And so I have two questions, but I got to jump off and run the class. So I'll just ask one, based on your experience, what should be emphasized in these tenure promotion packages, these portfolios? Because I think both of you, Cherie and sharing her case study, and you, and talking about community engaged scholarship. I mean, it's just broad. And certainly in my college, Arts and Sciences, which is the largest college at the University of Louisville, 23 departments and programs. We're just kind of, we're still trying to kind of figure it all out. So what should be emphasized in that tenure portfolio? Tenure promotion portfolio. And the other one had to do with I love what you said about the interdisciplinary approach in terms of focusing on big questions. And I think that our former president referred to as grand challenges. And I think the HSC campus took that and ran with it, and came up with ways of bringing all departments, units to bear on that. We haven't done that so much in A&S, but I do think that's a wonderful approach, and because we are kind of going through strategic planning in terms of reorganizing, and we need to break down the silos in our unit, so that we can have a means by which we can bring different scholars from different backgrounds to address different topics in the community. So if you just have some ideas about how to do that, I'm certainly going to go in and look at some of these universities and see what they're doing. But if you have anything you want to share on that, I would love to hear it. I may have to jump off, but it will be on the recording. And I thank you again for your time and sharing with us.
Well, it's lovely to see you again, and thank you. I was hoping I'd see some folks that I've known from my previous visits. It's lovely. I'll try to be quick, and because you need to go. I absolutely believe this is the future. We're going to organize faculty around questions, not around disciplines. And again, some of those institutions that I mentioned have already started to do this. It doesn't mean that you don't have a department as a base, but the act of teaching and learning and research is going to be more multidisciplinary and blended in a variety of ways. And it will be also, it's all going to get blended. It's because the teaching of students is going to be more and more in the field. And more in terms of, again, across different disciplines. The multi-generation we have now are not willing to just follow the path because they have different goals. And as they go into leadership, there will be these changes. And it's, I encourage you to look at some of those institutions that I mentioned and check out what they're doing.
Good. Next, I think we have Patrick, who has a question. Patrick, unmute yourself, please, and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm Patrick Axmeyer in Urban and Public Affairs. I'm an assistant professor. I think my question was primarily going to pertain to being able to identify and utilize existing resources for network development and initiatives for under-engaged communities, especially in the Louisville Metro, and in particular, like smaller communities that may kind of lay outside of the primary scope or the overwhelming scope of a lot of community engaged scholarship and research here at U of L. In particular, because the Metro encompasses communities within a different state, it can present a little bit of a challenge at times in terms of identifying which resources may be applicable. And let me kind of give an example here if it helps illustrate. But I recently had met and began to network with a smaller community leader in one of the Indiana municipalities surrounding the Louisville Metro. And it was a bit ironic that this leader has actually received their degree from U of L and finished their doctorate prior to becoming an elected official and a leader in that community. And upon meeting with them, they had kind of indicated that they were surprised that the university or anybody from that university had not yet really attempted to reach out to them, considering that U of L serves the Metro broadly, but it seems like some of the communities may get kind of overlooked simply because of their location, so rural communities in particular. So with that in mind, I'm trying to kind of get a feel or get some input concerning what has anybody utilized as like an existing resource with the university or within the community to help kind of catalyze some of those relationships and community building for and community engaged research and initiatives with some of these, I suppose, under engaged communities.
Wow, that's
a lot. Sorry.
that's a lot. But I'll try to tackle it in this way. It's very clear that the trend right now in engagement is to be more focused and intentional and to have clear goals, to actually have measurable outcomes. And of course, because this is not service, it is intellectual work of a faculty or more multi-faculty. It has to have aspects of research and production and sharing through refereed journals and so on. All that is still with us. But it changes because I'll tell you, at University of Nebraska, a number of faculty have started to do their publications with co-authors from community. There are ways we can start to open up and not treat the community as a place where we explore, but a place that we share wisdom and ideas, and we test ideas and do it together with a respect for the native information and ideas that are already rooted in the community. I don't know that totally answers your question, but again, I see the younger generations of faculty doing these kinds of things that include the ideas and expectations of the community, and they are contributing to research and to publications.
I would also chime in and say that I think that there is we used to have I'm going to get it wrong. Somebody might be able to help me, but it was called the Cooperative Consortium for Transdisciplinary Social Justice Research. Is Enid on here? I think it was called that. But that was an internal grant that promoted transdisciplinary community engaged work and gave out many grants to support that work, and they had to have multiple disciplines, and then they also had to have a community partner in order to receive the grant. And like, if you look, I'm sure there's still a website about the consortium. If you look at the kind of projects on there, I think you would see, I mean, they may not have been in Indiana, but they were out further. But I also want to state, and it's only because now I hear it all the time, that we, by state statute, have to be a premier metropolitan, university. And so a lot of our focus as it relates to community engagement is about the metro area, that we're an urban metropolitan area. So it's not at all discouraged for folks to go out into the areas that are not being served, because certainly in Kentucky we have plenty of those, and I'm from Louisville, so I get to talk about us. In Kentucky we have plenty of those, but I don't know that the mission of the university has always been to go out into the smaller rural areas, when our state statute says we're the premier metropolitan university. That doesn't stop us, but that we also are mission driven as well. So I just wanted to bring that up. And then I also put in the chat, I think some people have seen it, a list of different example things that you can do to prepare for your case based on Cherie Wallace's question, and it came from that document that I provided for you all earlier.
Thank you for sharing that. There's still several people in the queue that have comments, and I think next we have Laura Haynes. So Laura, go ahead, please.
Hey guys, thank you. Barbara, thanks for being here again. I remember having you in town a couple times, so welcome back, so to speak. I wanted to follow some of the comments. I think first with regard to Dana's question about term faculty, I would just say, yeah, it's awkward for sure that that there's not a lot of awareness that term faculty can and do get promoted. I don't think it's as recent as you say. So that sort of points to the notion that we don't get a lot of kind of nudging about when we're eligible for certain advancements. So I do feel like as a term faculty, I can speak from my experience that you do have to advocate for yourself even more than I think the average bear on campus when it comes to promotion and just awareness of what will help you situate yourself. The other thing I would say is, like Cherie has said many times, her reference, your comment about like service to teaching, how does service and community engagement and engaged scholarship inform or connect or tie to her teaching. I think that's a really big case to make for term faculty especially. I mean, teaching excellence, as you all have said, just having to say that, my work out in the community trains our students, gives them professional development and access opportunities, access to special populations that they wouldn't get, on campus or in the classroom, enriches that academic and personal training. And then I would say too, just sort of thinking about ways when we're doing work in the community, the students, whether they're graduate students or undergraduate students, can be collecting data, can be actually doing, research that may not necessarily always end up in publication, but could be presented, right? Could be part of a professional conference, could be part of a Metro, Louisville presentation or a campus presentation, where again, that community engagement is tying back into both teaching and research. So I think that building that Venn diagram and seeing those overlaps and really highlighting the overlaps is part of the process of defending and building your case. And then another comment that I wanted to make, and I think this comes back maybe to, I think it was Patrick, is I do think, so Henry's office, our Office of Community Engagement, and the Delphi Center are really excellent places. And then the Transdisciplinary Social Justice, Consortium, I can never get that right either, but you got it, Sheree. Great places for not just networking and resources like the handbooks, but also for funding, right? So looking for, like Henry's office just had a little grant call where building a case for your connection to a community partner, having a sound partnership and demonstrating, that there's benefit to that community and to your students. I think those are the things to kind of keep your ear to the ground about. I can remember back in the day of, Delphi's ideas to action work. We got a big grant way back in the day that was really, sort of early in the process of U of L really showing they value the kind of work that we do to engage with the community and to connect our students to those interventions and research. So those are just some things. I think just the Delphi Center, Office of Community Engagement, really important places to stay involved.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing that. Yes, we serve as a resource. So any faculty who like some assistance, guidance in this work, we are here to provide you with some guidance. Next in the queue, we have Kara Cashin. I hope I see this name correctly. But Kara, you're up next.
Okay, let's see. This is the first time I've used this application in this office, so I'm hoping it's working.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Is it okay? You can hear me and everything?
Yep. Yes.
Great. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation, Barbara. I think you make a compelling argument for why institutions really need to be open-minded about change. And I'm wondering, I was trying to look at some of the schools that you listed, and I was wondering, I'm trying to piece together some of the things in addition to ways that we can make arguments when we go up for promotion. I think there are some institutional changes that could take place to help support and demonstrate that the institution values this direction. And so you mentioned obviously breaking down those silos, still holding on to the departments, but then fostering ways of having multidisciplinary, solution-focused research projects and teaching. So what I was wondering is, what does that look like in teaching? Does it mean that the policies would be more flexible in terms of who gets credit for a co-taught course? Or does it mean we want more interdisciplinary programs? And you might still teach a class that's not as interdisciplinary, but it would be in a program that's more interdisciplinary. And does it mean we should be, on the research end, we should be valuing multi-author publications as much as single author publications? So I know that's true for in my department. If I'm not first author, I don't get very much percentage for the work at all, which goes against this future direction that we're talking about. So I was just wondering if you could, maybe if you had a few specific examples that you might be able to share with some institutional changes or policies that we could implement that would help support community engaged scholarship in this direction that we maybe hope to go into.
I would probably point first and foremost to Arizona State. which has actually, they had an experiment when they were building a new campus, a new additional campus. And they actually did organize and let the faculty organize themselves into pods, we'll call it. I don't remember what they called it. And it ultimately broke down because I'm 72 years old, so it's, I'm not being ageist. I'm telling you the plain truth. Senior faculty back on the main campus went berserk and said, no way, you're breaking up the culture of the individual departments. How in the world will we govern it? I'm sorry, but that's the future. University of Southern California has also organized many groups around multi-tasked people from different departments, and they have it is up to the provost and the other experts to protect and just demonstrate how we can do this. And it just takes patience. But I want to say all of those institutions that are starting to do this kind of collaborative cross-disciplinary research and teaching, they're thriving. They're thriving.
So you said Arizona State is a good example ultimately?
Yeah.
So they had some rough patches, but then
they were one of the first, and their president at the time actually made he thought up the idea. He was looking for greater prestige and of course connection with donors, especially in industry. And so it was sort of a way to double down to increase what we, as I said, back in the 1970s, 60s, we were higher ed was God. It was admired hugely because of the impact on health and science and everything. And Arizona State really took that card back and started it up again. And it was a lot of faculty, young and old, really have enjoyed the idea of being in a multidisciplinary group that has similar, and they have some core agendas, but they also still are also supporting their own work, their solo work, and you get more support. And does this make assessment of performance more difficult? Yes, it does. But you're still, if you want to still, I think over time, Arizona State again and some of the California campuses, there are other ways to assess it. And because why don't we as institutions assess the faculty research development impact on the intended audience?
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
So I feel that as those institutions continue and the it's just the world is in real trouble, and we need to have multiple lenses on big problems, and we can't do it sitting in our own departments all the time and only being assessed and awarded for being in doing one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little overstated, but not much.
Other things I would add there too is the fact that we need to make sure we support our faculty and we understand exactly what can count for promotion and tenure purposes, what kind of products, and also as reviewers, we need to have the appropriate criteria to evaluate these different products. So I think those are some of the different things that we can do. And so maybe Cherie, you and I can maybe spend some time maybe having some sessions on campus to educate faculty on what kind of stuff can be counted and what kind of criteria can be used. Many of these are addressed in the handbook, which there's a link in the chat for the handbook. But I think this having sessions, I think would also help as well. We are over our time, but if you can, please hang around. We still have Laura Rothstein who likes to pose her question.
Patiently waiting. She put up her hand first.
Yes, so
I saw it.
Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. Barbara, you know that I'm the choir. You don't have, I remember you when you came, and I think it was a powerful message when they created the vice president for community engagement at U of L. And I'm here in San Diego. This is my last semester as a faculty member, but I continue to care very much about U of L and its leadership in community engagement. So here's my question, because I know our time is short, or my comment. I know that the message and what's valued as important comes from the top. I want to know how much the president search and the provost search are asking candidates what they want to do, do they believe in community engagement? How would they support it in tenure and promotion and in other ways? Because I think we have a good groundwork for that. I chaired the advisory board for 10 years, and it was a great model. But we've had a lot of shift in leadership. So that's an opportunity to see what will happen. And I'm very proud of our Central High School program. Henry knows how much we've worked on that. And when I told the Central students last spring that I was leaving to go to San Diego, they said, "What are you going to do there?" And I said, "I'm going to try to start a program like that there." And they were very pleased to hear that. So, so thank you, Barbara, for coming. And I am a big believer in what you're saying.
Thank you. Thank you. I am very, very positive about the future of higher ed. It's going to be very, very different.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to lose tenure, but we may in some. I will say my last thing. It's going to last, but it's going to become optional. People are going to make a decision. I want it. I don't care. And so it's younger people don't really always really feel like I've recognized this in my last visit in the University of North Carolina. I was with a group of young faculty and having this conversation. And most of them said, "Shoot, I don't want to live here my whole life. I want to move around and my kids to be in different parts of the country. I don't want to be tied down." So
I can just chime in. I don't disagree with Barbara at all. I think we're already seeing some of that with, there's this presumption that people even stay at associate professor because they're not ready, or this mystique was full. And I think what we're not acknowledging and recognizing is that people don't necessarily care to be a full professor. The pay jump is not that great, at least here. And so like the mystique, like the whole, I think when Barbara talks about the holding on to yesteryears or generations of the past, our faculty are going to get younger and younger, and these 5 generations are very different. And if we continue to hold on to all of the generations of the past things, we'll continue to see high turnover. We'll continue to see people leaving around their 3rd year, and it's not because they can't get tenure. Folks that are leaving they're very tenured. They're brilliant. They can get tenure. And so we have to really come to grips with who we are and our identity in higher ed in 2022, not 1982 or 1952, but 2022. And I think that we currently, the way that I was just on a CODRA faculty concerns committee call with the interim vice president for community engagement. And the way that we're talking about community engagement is very much intertwined with a lot of the other things that we supposedly care about on this campus, including faculty diversity, recruitment, and retention, because we know that a lot of BIPOC faculty and women faculty are community engaged scholars. And so we can't continue on this path of not valuing that work, but also asking for emotional and intellectual labor that's based off of that work, without giving credit where credit is due. And so if we hold on to yesteryear's red book, tenure promotion at the department level, we're missing what today's world is like. And so I really appreciate Barbara for saying some of the things that I maybe couldn't say, because I'm not in my 70s, and I don't want to be passing judgment on my colleagues at all. But I do think, and it's not just the 70-year-olds. There are some. I'm 46. Oh, I'm 46. I'm 46. There's a lot of people in my part of the generational, 5-year generation that are still holding on, because it's like hazing. Well, I had to do it this way. You need to do it that way. But yeah, the world is not the way that it's always been. And so I think we have to continue to have these conversations, continue to have folks like Barbara come and tell us about ourselves, because it's sometimes easier to hear it from people external, but also friends of the university that know us and care about us, to still tell us about ourselves. So I feel seen, but I also feel heard. So thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us.
Well, we need the T-shirt. It's engagement is a method of teaching, learning, and research.
Excellent. Well, we have gone over time by 12 minutes, but I think it's 12 excellent minutes that were well spent. I want to thank everybody who took part in today's session. It's been wonderful. All those who asked questions, shared their thoughts and comments. Barbara, thank you so much for, always being there, for being a friend, being a mentor, a colleague, an educator, and everything else that you have been to me. I appreciate it. There you are, spending time with us this afternoon, and it is really, really appreciated. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you in San Diego next month at the KUMU conference. And we will actually be in San Diego in October. So Laura, look out, we may come and crash at your house.
Well, I saw a lot of familiar faces and names too, and I treasure my visits I've had to your campus.
Good. And hope we can get you to, talk with us again in the next few months. Not just this one time, but in the future as well. Again, thank you all very much, and have a wonderful rest of your